Imagine walking down a street where every corner tells a story of power struggles, hidden alliances, and dangerous rivalries. Which U.S. cities are battling the highest levels of gang crime? Is yours on the list? Today, we're exploring the 10 most gang-dominated cities in America, where violent turf wars, organized crime, and illegal trades shape everyday life. But what fuels these gang battles? And which city ranks as the most dangerous? Number 10. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Philadelphia, the birthplace of America, has over 1.5 million residents and some of the best food in the country. But let's be real. It's also got one of the worst gang problems in the US. You might think of Philly as Rocky Balboa's hometown, but trust me, gangs like the Bloods, Crips, Latin Kings, and the Philadelphia Mafia are running their own version of a fight club here. Gang violence is responsible for nearly 80% of all homicides in the city, and in 2024 alone, there were 516 murders. That's more than one per day. In some neighborhoods, especially Kensington and North Philly, it feels like gang turf wars never end. These gangs control massive drug operations, including fentanyl, cocaine, and heroin, with street dealers making up to $5,000 per night. If you want to know how bad it really is, Philadelphia's homicide rate is 34 per 100,000 people, which is higher than New York City and Los Angeles combined. And let's talk about carjackings. In 2024, Philly set a new record with over 1,400 reported cases. That's almost 4 per day. Most of them linked directly to gang activity. The police are trying their best, but gangs in Philly recruit kids as young as 12 years old. There are stories of middle schoolers carrying guns for gangs and running drug deals before they even hit high school. Some gangs even use Instagram and TikTok to show off their power and recruit new members. Law enforcement is cracking down hard, but with the gang population estimated at 20,000 members, Philadelphia is going to need more than just good luck to turn things around. Number 9. Kansas City, Missouri. Kansas City might not be the first place you think of when it comes to gang crime, but let's clear that up. This city is in full-blown gang warfare. With a population of 500,000 people, KC has become one of the deadliest places in America due to violent street gangs like the 246 Mafia Crips, the Bloods, and the 5 Ace Deuce Gangster Crips. The stats? Absolutely terrifying. In 2024, Kansas City recorded over 170 homicides, making its murder rate 31 per 100,000 people. That's higher than Los Angeles and Chicago. The city is also dealing with an explosion in drive-by shootings, with over 1,000 reported incidents last year alone. More than 70% of these shootings were linked to gang violence. One of the worst areas? The East Side. This part of town has been taken over by gangs battling for control of the $200 million illegal drug trade. Cocaine, heroin, meth, you name it, they sell it, and they're not afraid to kill for it. Here's something insane. Some of the gangs in KC operate like small armies. They've got their own secret codes, hand signals, and even uniforms. The biggest gangs even have connections to cartels in Mexico, bringing in drugs straight from the border. But the real shocker? Kansas City has one of the highest gang-related juvenile crime rates in the country. That means teens as young as 13 are getting caught up in gang wars. Some of them get in by choice, others are forced in. But once they're in, it's nearly impossible to escape. The police are trying everything: new task forces, undercover operations, and tougher laws, but Kansas City's gang problem isn't going anywhere anytime soon. Number 8. St. Louis, Missouri. You've probably heard the rumors, and yes, they're true. St. Louis is one of the most dangerous cities in America. The city only has 300,000 residents, but it somehow manages to have a murder rate of 64 per 100,000 people, the highest of any big city in the country. Gang violence here is out of control. In 2024, there were over 200 homicides, and according to local police, over 80% were gang-related. The worst part? Many of these murders are random drive-by shootings, with innocent people getting caught in the crossfire. St. Louis is home to some seriously ruthless gangs like the Egan's Rats, the 49 Boys, and the Southside Hustlers. These groups are locked in a never-ending war over drug trafficking, illegal weapons, and robbery operations. In some neighborhoods, police say gangs control entire apartment complexes, turning them into no-go zones. One of the biggest problems? Gangs in St. Louis are heavily armed. In a single year, police confiscated over 2,000 illegal firearms from gang members. Some of these guys are rolling around with military-grade weapons, including fully automatic machine guns. And the police? They're fighting an uphill battle. St. Louis has one of the lowest officer-to-civilian ratios in the country, meaning there just aren't enough cops to keep up with the violence. Even when gang members get arrested, many of them are back on the streets within months. The city has been trying to launch community programs and gang prevention initiatives, but with the average gang member making $50,000 to $100,000 per year from illegal activities, there's no shortage of new recruits. St. Louis is in crisis mode, and unless something changes, it's going to stay one of the most dangerous cities in America for a long time. Number 7. Oakland, California. Oakland might be known for its amazing food, music scene, and deep sports culture. But let's be real. It's also one of the most gang-ridden cities in America. With a population of over 430,000, Oakland has struggled with gang violence for decades, and things don't seem to be getting any better. Oakland's homicide rate in 2024 was around 36 per 100,000 people, which is higher than Los Angeles and San Francisco combined. In just 1 year, the city recorded 120-plus homicides, and the vast majority were linked to gang violence. The most notorious gangs? The Border Brothers, Norteños, Sureños, and the Black Guerrilla family. These guys run the streets, controlling everything from drug trafficking to human trafficking, and even illegal gambling rings. Oakland's gang problem exploded in the 1980s during the crack cocaine epidemic, and despite law enforcement efforts, gangs here have only grown stronger. One of the biggest issues: ghost guns, untraceable firearms that gang members build themselves. In 2024, Oakland police seized over 1,300 illegal guns, many of them in gang-controlled areas. The city's biggest battlegrounds are East Oakland and West Oakland, where turf wars break out almost daily. Some areas are so dangerous that even police won't respond to calls without backup. Drive-by shootings, home invasions, and armed robberies are so common that locals call certain neighborhoods the killing fields. But here's where it gets even crazier. Oakland's gangs are now using social media to recruit members and challenge rivals. Some gangs post videos flashing weapons and calling out enemies, leading to real-life shootouts in the streets. In fact, police say that over 60% of recent gang shootings were sparked by social media beefs. Oakland's government has tried everything from gang prevention programs to tougher gun laws, but the city's high poverty rate, 18%, and unemployment issues keep gangs well-stocked with new recruits. And with the drug trade generating millions per year, it's unlikely that Oakland's gang problem will disappear anytime soon. Number 6. Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis might be famous for Elvis, BBQ, and Beale Street, but it's also home to one of the worst gang problems in the country. With a population of 630,000, Memphis has one of the highest crime rates in America, and a lot of that is fueled by gang activity. Just how bad is it? Memphis recorded over 300 homicides in 2024, giving it a murder rate of 47 per 100,000 people, higher than Chicago. And the scary part? More than 70% of these killings were linked to gang violence. The most notorious gangs? The Vice Lords, Gangster Disciples, and the Crips. These groups control drug trafficking, car theft rings, and even weapons smuggling operations. Memphis is a major hub for the illegal drug trade thanks to its location along Interstate 40, one of the biggest drug highways in the U.S. This highway connects Memphis to cartels in Mexico, meaning gangs here have direct access to cocaine, heroin, and fentanyl. Police estimate that over $1 billion worth of drugs pass through Memphis every year, and gangs fight over every inch of that business. But drugs aren't the only problem. Carjackings have skyrocketed, with over 1,200 reported cases in 2024. Memphis gangs use stolen cars for drive-by shootings, robberies, and police chases. Some gangs even run stolen car chop shops, making millions by selling parts on the black market. One of the worst areas? Orange Mound. This neighborhood is completely overrun with gang activity, with police calling it one of the most dangerous places in the South. Even locals say they don't leave their houses after dark because of the constant gunfire and gang-related shootouts. Law enforcement is struggling to keep up, with Memphis police understaffed by nearly 500 officers. Meanwhile, gangs are getting more organized and powerful, even recruiting kids as young as 11 years old. The city is trying to fight back with new surveillance cameras, stricter gun laws, and more gang task forces, but Memphis's crime wave shows no signs of slowing down. Number 5. New Orleans, Louisiana. New Orleans has it all: jazz music, Mardi Gras, and some of the best food in America. But beneath the party atmosphere, there's a dark reality. Gang violence is tearing the city apart. With a population of just 370,000, you'd think New Orleans would be safer than larger cities. But in 2024, the city had a murder rate of 70 per 100,000 people, making it one of the deadliest places in America. In fact, last year, New Orleans was ranked the murder capital of the US. The biggest gangs? The 39ers, the Gotti Boys, and the Bird Gang. These groups are heavily involved in drug trafficking, human trafficking, and armed robberies. And because New Orleans is a major port city, drugs from South America flow straight into the city, fueling even more violence. But here's the real problem. New Orleans gangs don't just fight each other, they actively target innocent people. In 2024, over 600 people were shot in gang-related attacks, including dozens of children. Some of these shootings happened in broad daylight, in the middle of busy streets. One of the most infamous spots? The 7th Ward. This neighborhood is so dangerous that even police officers say they won't patrol alone. Carjackings, home invasions, and kidnappings have become everyday occurrences, with residents living in fear of the next outbreak of violence. Another shocking fact? New Orleans has one of the worst police shortages in the country. The NOPD is supposed to have 1,600 officers, but right now, there are barely 900 on duty. That means entire neighborhoods are left unprotected, giving gangs even more freedom to operate. The city has tried investing in youth programs and gang prevention efforts, but with poverty rates over 23% and unemployment still high, many young people see gangs as their only option. And as long as the drug trade remains a billion-dollar industry, New Orleans' gang problem isn't going away anytime soon. Number 4. Baltimore, Maryland. Baltimore has a rich history, from its famous crab cakes to being the birthplace of Edgar Allan Poe. But let's be honest, the city is also one of the most dangerous places in the US. With a population of just over 570,000, Baltimore has a crime rate that makes even bigger cities look safe. In 2024, the city recorded over 330 homicides, which translates to a murder rate of nearly 60 per 100,000 people, one of the highest in the nation. The reason? Gangs rule the streets. Some of the most feared groups include the Black Guerrilla Family, Bloods, Crips, and the Dead Man Inc. These gangs control drug trafficking, illegal gambling, and even human trafficking rings. The heroin and fentanyl trade alone is worth millions of dollars per year, and with Baltimore sitting right along the I-95 drug corridor, dealers have a steady flow of narcotics flooding the city. One of the worst areas? West Baltimore. If you've ever seen the TV show The Wire, you already know how bad it is. But in reality, it's even worse. Entire blocks are controlled by gangs, where residents live in fear of being caught in gun battles between rival groups. In some neighborhoods, the sound of gunfire is as common as car horns. The biggest problem? Gangs in Baltimore start recruiting kids as young as 10 years old. Many of these kids are fatherless, living in poverty, and see gangs as their only way to survive. In 2024, police arrested over 1,500 juveniles for gang-related crimes, including carjackings and armed robberies. Even worse, law enforcement is struggling to keep up. Baltimore's police department is severely understaffed, with officers quitting due to low morale and lack of funding. Meanwhile, gangs are getting bolder and more violent, using social media to plan attacks and recruit new members. The city has tried youth intervention programs and tougher gun laws, but with 23% of Baltimore residents living in poverty, the cycle of gang violence seems nearly impossible to break. For now, the streets of Baltimore remain some of the deadliest in America. Number 3. Detroit, Michigan. Detroit was once a booming city, famous for Motown music and the American auto industry. But today, it's one of the most dangerous cities in the country, thanks to extreme poverty, abandoned neighborhoods, and ruthless gangs. The numbers speak for themselves. Detroit has a murder rate of 55 per 100,000 residents, ranking it among the most violent cities in the U.S. In 2024 alone, the city reported over 270 homicides and 2,000-plus non-fatal shootings. And guess what? Most of these were gang-related. Detroit's most notorious gangs include the 7 Mile Bloods, the Vice Lords, and the Crips. These groups control drug trafficking, arms dealing, and car theft rings. In fact, Detroit is the carjacking capital of America, with over 1,800 reported car thefts in 2024 alone. Some gangs steal cars just to use them in drive-by shootings, while others strip them down and sell the parts on the black market. One of the biggest issues? Detroit's abandoned neighborhoods. Nearly 20% of the city is vacant land, and these empty houses become gang hideouts, drug dens, and crime hubs. Some areas, like Brightmoor and Dexter-Linwood, are so dangerous that even police hesitate to enter without backup. But perhaps the most shocking part of Detroit's gang problem is how organized they are. Some gangs operate like corporations, running multi-million-dollar drug operations and even bribing police officers. Corruption has been a serious issue in Detroit, with multiple law enforcement officials arrested for working with gangs. The poverty rate in Detroit is over 30%, making it one of the poorest big cities in America. And when people have no jobs, no opportunities, and no way out, many turn to gangs as a means of survival. The city has tried revitalization efforts, but crime remains one of the biggest obstacles to recovery. For now, Detroit remains a city of contrasts, where wealth and ruin exist side by side, and where gangs still hold more power than the police in some neighborhoods. Number 2, Los Angeles, California. Los Angeles, the city of Hollywood, palm trees, and perfect weather. But beyond the glitz and glamour, LA is also home to some of the deadliest gangs in the world. The gang culture here isn't just a problem, it's a part of the city's identity. LA has over 450 active gangs, with more than 45,000 gang members, making it one of the largest gang populations in the world. Some of the biggest names? The Bloods, Crips, MS-13, Sureños, and Norteños. These gangs controlled drug trafficking, extortion, human trafficking, and murder-for-hire rings. In 2024, Los Angeles recorded over 600 homicides, with gang-related shootings accounting for nearly 70% of them. That means almost every single day, someone is killed because of gang violence. Some of the most dangerous neighborhoods include South Central, Compton, Watts, and East LA, where turf wars between rival gangs can erupt over something as small as a graffiti tag. One of the biggest gang problems in LA is the Mexican cartel connection. Many of the city's gangs are directly linked to drug cartels in Mexico, bringing in billions of dollars worth of heroin, fentanyl, and methamphetamine into the U.S. every year. This means that killing over drug debts is just business for some of these gangs. Another massive issue? Gang recruitment starts young. Many gangs target kids as young as 8 years old, grooming them to become future members. Some gangs even force new recruits to commit violent crimes, like robbery or murder, just to prove their loyalty. LA also has a serious gun problem. With the rise of ghost guns, homemade firearms with no serial numbers, it's easier than ever for gang members to get their hands on deadly weapons. In 2024, police seized over 1,700 ghost guns from gang members, but it hasn't slowed down the violence. The city has spent millions on gang prevention programs, but with so much money being made from crime, gangs are not disappearing anytime soon. In LA, the battle between law enforcement and gangs is never-ending. Number 1. Chicago, Illinois. Chicago, the Windy City, home of deep dish pizza, legendary jazz, and some of the deadliest gang wars in America. If there's one place where gang violence has completely taken over, it's here. Chicago isn't just bad, it's the epicenter of gang-related crime in the U.S. In 2024 alone, Chicago recorded over 650 homicides, with more than 80% linked to gang violence. On top of that, there were over 2,800 non-fatal shootings. That means, on average, someone is shot every 3 hours in Chicago. If that doesn't send chills down your spine, I don't know what will. So, who's running the streets? Over 100,000 gang members are active in the city, belonging to more than 100 different gangs. Some of the most dangerous groups include the Gangster Disciples, Black P Stones, Vice Lords, Latin Kings, and Black Disciples. These gangs don't just control drugs and weapons, they own entire neighborhoods. One of the biggest problems? Gangs in Chicago don't have clear leadership anymore. Back in the day, major gangs were led by notorious crime bosses who controlled their members and kept things organized. But today, the structure has collapsed, leaving behind hundreds of smaller factions fighting for dominance. This means random shootings, turf wars, and endless retaliation killings. Chicago's south and west sides are like war zones. Some areas, like Englewood, Garfield Park, and Austin, have murder rates higher than some third-world countries. In these neighborhoods, gunshots replace fireworks, and walking outside at night can be a death sentence. And the police? They're overwhelmed. Chicago's police department, CPD, has over 12,000 officers, but that's not enough to stop the chaos. Many officers feel outgunned and outnumbered, especially since gangs now use social media to coordinate attacks and taunt rivals. Platforms like Instagram, Snapchat, and even TikTok are filled with gang members flashing guns, stacks of cash, and threatening enemies. But what's really fueling all this violence? Poverty and lack of opportunity. Chicago has a poverty rate of 18%, and in some neighborhoods, unemployment is as high as 30%. Many young men feel like they have no future, so they join gangs for money, protection, and a sense of belonging. The city has spent millions on anti-gang programs, youth intervention efforts, and even violence interrupters, former gang members trying to prevent shootings. But the reality is, until poverty, education, and economic opportunities improve, Chicago's gang problem isn't going anywhere. For now, the Windy City remains the deadliest gang capital in America, where the streets are ruled by bullets and survival is never guaranteed.